My name is Lanny, Lavalley, and that was in E4. So we anticipated going back to Hawaii and through the Panama Canal, but they said, no, you're going to do a world tour. So we went from the Philippines to Singapore, spent a couple of days in Singapore. We spent it at a base there, a Navy base, and again, you were meeting with different people, different cultures, went to a few restaurants, did a few things. For the days, you still had to stand watches, you still had duties aboard ship, what they call duty section. And so it was interesting, you know, people and our people and different culture. And you didn't always have time enough in these ports to know them. But you respected, they respected you, you did what you wanted to do when you were on port or in port. Partied a little bit, bought a few things, some souvenirs, and then left on your way. So we went from Singapore over to cross the Indian Ocean to Massawa, Ethiopia. In Massawa, Ethiopia, we refueled and spent about 10 or 12 hours in Massawa. And it was interesting because it was hotter than blazes. The temperature on the deck was about 135 degrees. We were not allowed to be above deck too long because actually it would burn through your feet, would burn through the bottom of your shoes. We didn't have the thicknesses that from the deck because the decks were black, gray and black, and it absorbed the heat, and you know it penetrated your feet, you know, your shoes. So anyway, we went from there through the Suez Canal, and I believe that after we had passed through the Suez Canal was when the 7-day war between Israel and Egypt. They were waiting for the last American warship, which was us, to pass through the canal before they started their action. After we'd gone through the Suez, we sat in the Mediterranean waiting to see if the United States was going to be becoming involved with that, and luckily it was a 7-day war. We moved on. We stopped in Naples, Italy. We stopped in Malta. And when we were there those days, we did tours. You know, we went to different things, again, different currencies, learning different languages, learning different foods, all the things of that particular culture. And again, it was always a few days. I remember my buddies, my two friends, in most cases we tried to stay away from where the sailors were. We would somehow get out of the city, like in Naples we move on, or Singapore. We kind of stayed away from those areas where the sailors had the reputation. So in most of these ports we would escape to these different areas. And I remember in Italy we went up to this little village and we were very well welcomed by these Italian people. There was a bar, stopped and had a beer, and we were asked if we wanted to play bocce. We didn't know anything about bocce, but they had bocce courts, I guess, in the backyard. So we played bocce with the older men. They were all old to us, being, you know, we were in our early 20s. These guys were not old today because we're that age, but they were older men. And then after we played bocce for a while, they asked us for dinner, so they fed us Italian meal. And then we had to be back at ship, wherever you were in port, depending upon your rank, you had times you had to be back aboard ship. Sometimes, you know, such and such between an E2 and an E4, you had to be back 10 o'clock at night. If you were higher ranked, some of them were at 11, some were 12. So there was always different time frames, depending upon your rank, how long you could spend away from the ship. So anyway, we went back to ship, had a good time, met some people. As we did, we tried to meet people and speak to them, and you know, communicate through signs. language, very poor language to each other, but most of the time we got the message across and they understood what we were trying to say and vice versa. So it was always interesting. So we came back through, then stopped at Gibraltar before going through from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. So we stopped there and it was interesting. We were there just for one day. It was different because a lot of baboons on Gibraltar. It was loaded with baboons. And we were told, don't carry any food, don't eat in front of them, don't do anything like that because they will attack you for the food. And they were quite nasty. You walking down the street and there were groups of them, and I guess they're called the Congress. And they come down and they would be snarling at you, showing you their teeth. So it was intimidating walking around. So most of us didn't stay too long, turned around and went back to ship because of the intimidation factor. So we left there, went to the Azores, which are islands in the Atlantic in the northern part. So from the Azores we spent a day or two there, I guess, and then headed back to Rhode Island. So we had done a world tour, which was very, very seldom happens in the Navy. Most Navy men never circumnavigate the Earth. We were a group that circumnavigated. We did sail through both canals, the Suez and the Panama, doesn't happen. Did all the oceans except the Antarctic. Later on in our next cruise, we did the Arctic Ocean, but we'll get to that. So I've been basically in all the oceans of the world, except the Antarctic Ocean. So we came back across, did a lot of the seas. I think we pretty much, in my career, did the 7 seas. I was lucky during the big push was that we were gone the 9 months. We were at home back in, I think early May, I think we actually pulled back into Newport, Rhode Island. Of course, families are there meeting you. You hadn't seen them in 9-10 months. So everybody was great. People took leave. Some guys you have to still stay. The ship has to have a certain number of men aboard it in case there's emergencies. So I think you operated what we call a skeleton crew, which is about 1/3 of the crew. When we were in Vietnam, we had a complement of 295 guys. Most times, because of the war zone and because of the issues, we were over complement. Generally, we had a crew of about 250 sailors and officers. But when we came back, about 1/3 of us had to stay aboard ship. You could see your family, obviously, talk to your family and tell them I would be home in 2 weeks or I'll be home in 3 weeks for leave. And so that's what transpired.